At the end of this introduction to Capture One, let's talk about exporting files. It sounds very simple, but maybe for some of you, this is not so simple, especially when you are starting. You might be asking questions. How should you export your files if you're not working in Camera? Well, there's first method that I'm actually not using. You can open your files, your edited files in Adobe Photoshop straight after. Though I actually never open my files that way and I exporting them in traditional way. I have my way of working, which I'm going to explain you probably, and we're going to talk about this. First thing, why I'm doing like that? Because usually when I receive the set of the images, I do at first raw processing. So let's say it's 20 images, so I process them all to make them looking all the same. Of course, with similar settings to make the set looks well together. And at the end, I export them all to start my work in Photoshop. So let's open this little icon over here. This is where you actually export your files when you process them. And you have some of the information, and the first thing that is most interesting for you is in the process receipt, the format of your images. So as you can see, it's already set as a TIFF file, and yes, I usually export my files into the TIFF. I did few times, especially when I retouch lookbook, for example, and I need to do this fast. I can export my files as PSD. And why I'm actually doing this that way, because I don't feel I will ever go back to open the file in Capture One. So there is no need to actually export to TIFF, and most important when I retouch lookbook is actually time. But for you at this moment, why I export to TIFF file? TIFF file is probably the biggest format, and it will deliver you the highest quality. And unlike JPEG, it's uncompressed. So this is very important. You never want to export your file in JPEG because it doesn't contain much information. And it also only offers you bit depth, 8-bit depth, the color depth, which is not really enough when you think about professional retouching. You want to keep 16-bit to avoid any kind of banding or other difficulties. So the first thing, I export into TIFF and then I start my work in Photoshop. It doesn't really mean that I will ever go back to Capture One because I think it never happened. If I want to fix something in Capture One, after all, I do my processing once again. I just go back to Capture One and trying to do something more, but never go back with the TIFF file I already exported. I can go back with TIFF file after I finish my work in Photoshop, but not straight after processing it. It doesn't really happen. So this information over here, I believe, are clear right now. So everything is 100%. TIFF file 16-bit to keep the highest possible quality. As an output location, we just have to choose the choose folder where you're going to export your file. So hit choose folder, and then you're looking for a folder on your computer, whether it's somewhere on the desktop, etc., where you want to export your file. And we're going to do this when we will be working on our image. Below is simply output naming. Very often when I have set, I go with the numbers, and that's all you should be interested. And on the bottom, you have all of the information, your summary. So you have size, you have profile, which I have as Adobe RGB here. It doesn't really matter. If you will be working in Adobe RGB, it's absolutely fine. And the file size is really big right now. Yes, the files are really huge. So if you want to keep quality, you have to pay of course, you have to pay for the size of your computer. So I think in Photoshop, I'm working right now as a Pro Photo RGB, so I'm going to change my Photoshop profile. As I mentioned to you, the best way is to work in Adobe RGB or Pro Photo RGB, but as it was said before, of course, Pro Photo RGB is the biggest color space, but a few months ago there was a lot of people and huge fame on it, but more likely magazines will prefer often to send them sRGB or files safe for web. So it's not really that important as you might think. That I could work in Pro Photo RGB as well, because for now my Photoshop is set like this. But if you're not working in Pro Photo RGB, it's not a problem. So that's all about the introduction. And I think we walk through most important thing to make you comfortable to start with this and experiment with Capture One. And of course, while I will be working on my images, you will explore more and probably it will become much more fluent for you.